Farther ahead, Dom cruises past a low industrial building toward an intersection. As he shifts gears, the Supra rounds a bend in the road, comes up on the same intersection, and slows to a stop alongside the Charger. Brian looks at Dom.
I used to drag here back in high school. That railroad crossing up there is exactly a quarter mile away from here. On green, I'm going for.
Each man turns his attention to the road ahead. As the hanging traffic signal above them glows red, the three inlets on the Dodge's Ram air intake open and close. The green element on the traffic signal lights up and the Charger takes off, popping a wheelie. Brian briefly cruises neck and neck with the muscle car, then Dom takes a decisive lead. Brian hits the right-hand NOS button on his steering wheel. The reflection in the side of the black Charger shows the Supra retake a parallel position. In a flash, they whip by side. As the vehicles remain neck and neck, a railroad signal in their path blinks red. A traveling view follows the diesel engine on approach. Separate views of Brian and Dom sway and blur, looking smeared. As Dom shifts gears, the cars rocket along the industrial zone street. A ground-level view shows the train hurtling forward along the rails. Newspaper scraps waft up as the cars pass. As Dom eyes a gauge needle, the view dives into his engine where something ignites and smoke billows from the Charger's undercarriage. On the rails, the diesel engine passes swiftly over the wooden ties. The forward-moving view switches to Dom's as the crossing signal arms lower. The blurring smearing effect returns, showing Dom and Brian look at each other in slow motion. Dom punches his gas pedal amid accumulating smoke. Both men shift gears and up their speed toward the crossing. As the Supra gains a partial lead over the smoking Charger, the freight train barrels toward the intersection. Both men glance warily toward the fast-approaching engine, then the blurring view resumes, and all angles of approach converge closer and closer. As Brian's thumb presses a NOS button, both drivers face solemnly forward, white-knuckling their steering wheels. A view from the train cab shows the racers dead ahead. Both cars smash through the wooden guard arms and just barely clear the monstrous locomotive. Safely on the other side, Dom and Brian regard one another. Brian gawks off to their right, and Dom sees the semi-truck too late. His car collides with the truck and spirals through the air over Brian, who pulls to the roadside as the Dodge crashes back down. The Charger bounces nearly upright and grinds forward on its front passenger side corner before tumbling once and landing wheels down in the middle of the street. Brian springs out of the Supra, gun in hand, and runs over to the mangled Dodge.
Dom!
Dom sits panting at the wheel, blood trailing down his temple. He turns his head slightly in Brian's direction.
That's not what I had in mind.
As Dom boosts his upper body out the open window, he avoids using his left arm. Brian briefly helps steady him on his feet. Leaning on the wrecked car, Dom cradles his injured arm and shoots a look at Brian. The undercover officer peers back toward the railway crossing and the point of collision with the truck. Smoke from the Charger veils the scene as the two men stand face to face. Brian goes to speak but closes his mouth instead. Dom holds his shoulder and looks away. As Brian keeps his gaze fixed on Dom, he pulls the Supra keys from his pocket and offers them up. Dom immediately looks at them, then at Brian. He accepts the keys with his good hand.
What you doing?
I owe you a 10-second car.
His eyes narrowed in the glaring sun. Dom nods firmly and steps away. Brian watches the muscular mechanic head for the Supra at a brisk stride. As Brian takes a few steps in his direction, Dom turns the sports car away and speeds off. The Supra makes a sharp left at a T-shaped intersection and drives out of sight parallel with another freight train lumbering along in the distance. Brian turns his back on the entire scene, his face set sternly. Shown in slow motion, he walks in the direction of the sirens. As he glares ahead in the bright sunlight, his face passes by just as the view fades to black.